Welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to check out this video. Today we will be exploring the Uranus ingress into the sign of Taurus. And for those of you who are new to this channel, my name is Ryver. I'm the intersectional astrologer and Reiki master of Psyche and Soul astrology. My mission is to help you remain grounded and empowered while you accelerate your growth. And to do that, each week I break down an astrological transit and I leave you with a tangible takeaway at the end of every single video, either a challenge of the week or a question of the week, to help you really sink your teeth into what's going on and practically harness the power of the stars. So just like with each week, you'll see me down in the corner for a minute. I'll pop up the chart. We'll talk a little bit about what we can look at astrologically speaking, and then I'll break that down into plain English and give you that tangible takeaway. So first thing I want you to notice is that on the rising sign, somewhere around here on the screen, you'll see that we have Scorpio rising on this chart, which means that Mars, the classical ruler of Scorpio, is also the ruler of this whole chart. So action is really going to be setting the tone for the next 7 years. On the other hand, if you're more of a modern astrologer type, then Pluto rules this chart. And what we have is transformation, really setting the tone for the next 7 or 8 years. Now, last year we got a little trailer, so to speak, a little teaser of what is going on with Uranus and Taurus overall. We can also think about the last time Uranus was in Taurus. So think back to last year between May and the beginning of November, and you'll get a bit of a sense of some of the themes for yourself personally, as well as for your home country, culture, and so on. Or you can look back. Most of us will have to think back to our history classes. There are some of us who might actually remember 1935, but as a whole, 1936 through 1942, the last time that Uranus transited the sign of Taurus. Now, if you think back to that time period, most of us will remember a lot of really big stuff went down. And leading up into 1942, a lot of really big, kind of world-changing stuff was brewing. Right now, we've got that same sort of vibe. Now, we can look at this chart a bit more and see a few other themes that we can expect over the course of the next several years leading into 2026, when we'll see the next kind of transition of Uranus into a new sign. So the first thing that I want to point out is that Uranus and Mars are in the same sign. Mars kind of taking the lead in terms of setting the tone for how this whole chart, this whole transit is going to unfold, both being in the sign of Taurus. We have fixed Earth, and already we see just a week into Uranus's kind of foray into Taurus that Earth stuff, environmental stuff is already being really highlighted. Think about in the States, Green New Deal, and how significant that is, or worldwide, the understanding through science, that's a Uranus thing, right? Scientists are coming out and saying, we've got maybe 11, 12 years before the environmental shit has already hit the fan. We're in the mode now where we're in the final countdown of being able to sway the unfolding process of climate change, whatever you may think about that. Now, the other things that I want to point out before I drop the chart away and just talk to you, me and my face, is that we have, in the modern sense, the ruler of Taurus is Venus, right? Most of us know that. I've talked about it a bunch already in the last couple weeks. And in the modern sense, the ruler of Aquarius, which is where Venus is in this chart, like right there in the second house, Uranus rules where Venus is, and Venus rules where Taurus is. That, amongst astrologers, we call that a mutual reception. Kind of think about, like, if you're in charge of one department and your friend is in charge of another department in a, let's say, restaurant, right? If you're the lead bartender and your friend is the lead server, then the two of you are kind of gonna be ruling and running the whole show, because you got this tight little group where the two of you are in charge of each other's domains. Or, you know, if your best friend's the lead bartender and you bartend sometimes and they're the lead server, whatever. You get my point. And Mercury is retrograde, so I'm going to try to keep this short to limit the possibility of confusion. The last things I'll point out is that the house position can also tell us a bit about what's going on here. in this chart, Mars across the screen there is in the 6th house, which indicates daily action. Bit by bit action is going to really heavily influence what we've got going on here. And then we've got Uranus in the 5th house. So creativity, ingenuity, that's going to be really, really highlighted for the entire duration of Uranus moving through the sign of Taurus. And then Venus is in the 2nd house, which is often associated with resources, right? Tangible, physical, material resources, or some people will say the money in your pocket. So a lot of astrologers are already talking about or predicting really big changes with our banking systems, with the environment as a whole, and what we're seeing with the kind of collective zeitgeist-like response to this collective climate change issue and to our more local, national, regional issues around the environment, around food shed systems or food production, is a lot of technological change and a lot of people advocating that we each personally make small little changes, and that as those add up, as those aggregate, we'll actually see some pretty profound changes on the world level on a big, large scale. So I'm gonna drop the chart away. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about an intersectional way of looking at some of these things and contrast that with a little bit more of the standard way of looking at a few of these things. And then I'll give you some dates and the tangible takeaway. So a kind of standard way of looking at the rulership schema here, and I'm going to focus on a traditional interpretation because most astrologers, at least, and most students of astrology will be able to grok Mars and grok Venus and consider those two planets in relationship to this unfolding transit over the course of now until 2026 or so. So Mars is a planet that is often associated with action, with passion, with our going after the things we want, whereas Venus is the things that we want. So Venus might tell us the things that we find pleasurable, the things that we find comforting to a certain extent, the way we like to do leisure, the types of foods we might like to eat. If we think about it in terms of like sex and romance, Venus is the romance and Mars is the sex. Now, if we think about this in an intersectional sort of way, and by that I mean a way that is conscious of power and privilege and how that plays out in a political context, then we might think about Venus as our resources, Venus as our values, right? Because there is some class stuff going on there. And we might think of Mars as our access, Mars as the way in which our drive and ambition is interpreted and received or perceived by society at large. And so the way that I see that playing out in terms of this particular transit is already that, you know, more and more people that we might never have expected to talk about things like intersectionality are speaking about intersectionality. Just the other day, Ariana Grande tweeted, "It ain't feminism if it ain't intersectional." Blew my mind. Last place I would have expected to hear or read a celebrity talking about intersectionality. It's on folks' minds. We really can't separate the things that we're able to do, Mars, from the resources that we have, Venus. We really can't separate our drives and our ambitions from our class experience, right? And I'll leave it at that because power and privilege and politics can get really messy, and it's maybe best left for another video to really dive into those issues. Now, on the other hand, what we can see, if we're looking at it in the more kind of standard formulation, is that we are really seeing a lot of men's rights stuff come up, which is its own thing that we won't explore here today. But we're also seeing a lot of people really contending with the way that sex and romance, especially along gender divides or sex divides, are playing out in society. There's a lot of the collective consciousness, a lot of the zeitgeist right now has to do with how women do being women, how men do being men, what it means to identify in one way or another, the difference between masculinity and toxic masculinity, the difference between feminism and intersectional feminism, and we could really kind of go on and on down the list, but I want to rein it back in Mercury is still retrograde right now, and talk about this Uranus transit. Now, I think the easiest way for a transit that lasts this long for us to discuss what's going on and understand how we can work with the energy is to look at the times when the transit will be activated. So what do I mean by that? Uranus will be moving through Taurus for another 8 years or 7 years roughly, right? It started last year to a certain extent. So that's a really long time, and it's hard to figure out, especially at the very beginning of a transit, what's gonna happen for the next 7 years. But we can look at times when the moon, when like the faster moving planets are going to be in the same part of the sky as Uranus. So the moon is gonna tell us a lot about the feeling side, how we are relating to the experiences that we have, right? How we're digesting and assimilating the experiences related to Uranus. So moon-wise, we're gonna wanna take a look at tomorrow, March 10th. I'll do my best to get this video up tomorrow or before tomorrow so that you can think about this. Or if not, you'll wanna think back a day or two and see how, like, one, what was going on March 10th, and two, how were you feeling March 10th about liberating yourself in the context of the environment, or about technology in the environment, or about awakening to your resources, right? Or your consciousness around the resources that you have or that you need. That's gonna be Uranus in Taurus stuff. You're also gonna wanna take a look a month ahead. We're gonna look at April 6th. That's the next time that the moon will be conjunct Uranus. And we can look at April 22nd. That's when the sun will be conjunct Uranus. So whereas the moon is reflective, right? Like literally in the sky, the moon reflects the light of the sun. That's how we're able to see it. So the moon is about how we reflect on our experiences, whereas the sun is about our conscious awareness of the things that we're doing and choosing, right? It's more identity oriented. So between March 10th and April 6th, what are you reflecting on? What are you feeling? What are you digesting? By April 22nd, you can start to see, what do I see? What do I notice? What am I consciously thinking about? Or how do I identify in terms of the things that are coming up, you know? If you're a states person, if you live in the US, then you could think about, you know, maybe for the next month or so, you'll be feeling into Green New Deal and where you stand on that. And by April 22nd, you might have, you know, a position that you really identify with, one way or the other. A couple other things that we can think about, and I think these will be the two really significant ones, and I won't go too much further ahead with them because it can get to be a lot of dates, and Mercury's retrograde, so I don't want to confuse you or me here. The month of May, I think, is really going to tell us a lot. On May 4th or 5th, depending on where you are in the world, we will have a new moon in Taurus that lights up Uranus. That is going to be really significant. Also an opportunity where we can set some intentions, not just for that Taurus moon cycle, but also for the entirety of the Uranus transit through Taurus. So if you know where Taurus is in your chart, you know what planets are being aspected and activated, it's going to be a really good time to set some intentions about what you hope to do and what you hope to awaken over the course of the next 7 years. And if you don't already know that, I am available for personal chart readings. You can find that on my website, psycheandsoulastrology.com, under the consultations tab. I always throw a link for that for my booking page as well. So if that's something you're interested in, we can really dive deep and explore those topics. And if not, then really think about what's going on around that time and what's going on May the 18th. That's going to be the big one, where Venus, who rules this whole 7-year period of Uranus in Taurus, will be conjunct Uranus in Taurus. So those are the big dates that I want you to think about. Now, the little kind of quippy thought that I had that I think can kind of really help us to understand the overall tone is this: the revolution will not manifest overnight, right? that is what we've got going on over the course of the next 7 years. We should all be seeing some really big revolutionary change in the way that we deal with our food systems, in the way that we deal with banking, in the way that we really interact with the world. And definitely climate change seems to be top of the list of what we're all looking at here. And on an individual level, wherever Taurus is in your chart, whatever Venus rules in your chart, those areas of life, those areas of your chart will be experiencing revolutionary change, like completely flipping the world upside down. Uranus rules reversals. So those are my quick thoughts on the beginning of this Uranus and Taurus transit, what's going on with it, how we can begin to start to think about it, particularly if you are inclined towards looking at the intersection of lots of different axes of analysis. And that brings us to your tangible takeaway. And for this tangible takeaway, I want to leave you with a question of the next rest of the decade, of the month, of the week, of the day, however you want to do it. I'll call it question of the day. What revolution do you want to see take place? Feel free to answer that question down below in the comments section. You can always use that hashtag along with Armchair Astrology, and you can at me on Twitter, on Instagram, or on Facebook. That's going to be at Astrolids. I'll drop that down below so you could see how it's typed out. Avoid that Mercury in retrograde confusion. So again, the question of the day is, what revolution would you like to see take place? I would love to hear your answer. Anywhere on social media, feel free to private message me however you want to get in touch, or just mull it over. And until we meet again, thank you so very much for taking the time to check out this video. If you haven't already, click on the subscribe button, smash on the notification bell. It really means a lot, and it really helps me to grow my practice. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone on social media. That's another way that you can help support me and the work that I am doing. I hope that this work that I'm doing supports you in some tangible way. Thank you again for your time and for checking out this video. Until we meet again, all the best to you, and may you experience the revolution of your dreams come true.